The following is a preview of a Patreon exclusive.
So let's get into it. So this is from a certain point of view. For those that maybe aren't as familiar, this is where we invite our listeners to come onto the air and they tell us what they find awesome about Star Wars. And we really just give it a very broad topic. And we've been doing these top threes, which seem to be fun because it's pretty easy to prepare for it. Although this one was a lot more difficult than I gave it credit for. When it came up for, I was like, oh, it's top 3 moments for 6 episodes. How hard could it be? And I was like, oh crap, there's a lot of good stuff in these 6 episodes to try to figure out and try to limit to just 3 and only maybe 2 dozen, honorable mentions or something like that. But we're going to go around the horn. We're going to ping everybody. Everybody's going to get their 3. We'll do a little honorable mentions before we get to that top slot. And so, Rod, thought we'd start with you. What is your third top moment in the first 6 episodes? So we have to remember, we're not doing 7 or 8, just the first half of the season, which I caught myself on twice already. But what's your number 3 moment for the series so far?
So my number 3 moment is in episode 6, at the very end, where Luthen goes back to his shop and he just smiles when he hears about what happens on Aldhani. It's very interesting to see how, there's a lot of planning, a lot of moving parts, and usually for the underdogs, which he represents, it's really hard to pull things off. And as he pulled it off and he realized it happened, he just has this glorious smile, and it's a really cool moment.
Yeah, it's really cool because I like that you get the celebratory moment, and it's like this huge wave of relief has finally just washed over him. But then we would talk a little bit about that on the show too, and maybe Albert pointed this out, but after you get that wash of relief, it's almost like reality sets in for just a hair there. And this is where Stellan Skarsgård has been just so amazing in the series, and the same with Genevieve O'Reilly, because I mean, you just get these very subtle motions and facial expressions to where you're like, oh no, okay, what's next? What comes next? Did you pick up that kind of vibe as well, Rod? Or is it no, it's just pure adulation and just celebratory?
Well, I would say right when episode 6 ends, we're only in that moment of bliss. We're only in that, we did it. How awesome. I'm sure after that, everything you said lines up. What do we do next? What's going to happen? But it seems like Luthen's character, he kind of anticipated what would happen next, and he actually went forward wanting to see what would happen next. And there may be another reason why I like this moment is there might be a lot of, quote unquote, rebel movements happening, but this is the first organized, large scale rebel movement that we know about. Especially with Mon Mothma somewhat supporting, that isn't a successful win. So that we could be witnessing the first big attack, and it went off, all things considered, well.
About as well you could expect at this point. All right, Justin, how about you? What's your third moment?
Yeah, so I also pulled from episode 6 here, kind of near the end, but a few scenes before that. The scene where with Cassian and with Skeen sitting there and talking after the heist, and Skeen offers to split the money with him and run off free, and Cassian ends up gunning him down. It was, for me, even knowing who Cassian is, was it was a very shocking moment. I did not see that coming. I wasn't expecting that, and for me it spoke to, we've seen Cassian at the beginning with the Corpos taking both of them down, and back at the beginning of Rogue One he takes down his associate there. But this is the first named character that we've gotten to know and spent some time with that Cassian kills, and it said to me that this show is not kidding around, to put it lightly. And over the course of 6 episodes building up to this moment with Cassian, that he's in this for him. And my second moment will speak to that too. But that scene really caught me by surprise.
So when he did that, it was this very kind of knee-jerk reaction and this very visceral type of feeling. Did you feel like it was something that Andor almost took offense to, given that Nemec died, or what do you think the motivation was for him pulling the trigger on Skeen?
I think there was an element of that, because I think despite Cassian's kind of dismissive tone towards Nemec at times, I think he saw the good in Nemec and saw some good in his idealistic urge. But also, Cassian had talked about trusting one another in episode 5 when they're going to the mission, and I think he saw, and you and Albert talked about this on that episode that if him and Skeen were going to run off, then it was going to be him and Skeen, right? And who was going to pull the trigger faster to get away from there. And so I think there was some self-preservation, knowing that he couldn't trust Skeen any further than he could throw him.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I like that one a lot. Rob, what's your third top moment so far?
I went with the introduction of Linus Mosk and the whole gung-ho mall cop getting ready to go out and take down Andor and everybody else out there with his, the best way to sharpen a blade is to use it, and, pockets are fermenting. Just a great new Star Wars character. I really liked the setting and kind of where they went with that.
Well, I'm going to have to agree with you on that one. My number 3 is in honor of Albert, who's not with us tonight, and it's Pockets of Fermenting by Sergeant Linus Mosk, the most notorious gangster in that corridor, in the Morlano 1 sector. This guy's a beast. I mean, everything about him just emanates confidence, and, he's the man. He knows he's the man. He just needs that champion leadership from this loser Cyril,
and he's been waiting forever to have this opportunity, so he's gathered all his great troops out, and they're going to just go, take on the day. Absolutely great.
Exactly. Yeah. No, this is a great call. Yeah. Mosk definitely. I don't know about y'all, but and Rod and Justin, please chime in. Like, it just seemed like this guy just stole the scene every single time he came in. Of course, now he's famous too because he dropped the first, I guess, true swear word in Star Wars. I mean, this guy's a really important figure. Justin, how did you react to when he dropped an SH bomb in Star Wars?
Yeah, I don't want to step too much on one of my future moments here, but I liked it, and I like the the overall tone of the show that I think that kind of sets. This is a little more adult. It's a little more, I liked it overall.
How about you, Rob? Rod?
So his type of character is someone we can find in so many of our like day-to-day work situation. He is a true like technician. He knows his work. He stands by it. He probably has the respect of everyone. You could see that in, was it episode 2 when they had the speech and the dichotomy between him addressing his troops versus Cyril addressing his troops. He commands that respect. You trust him. You want him to lead you. I think his character is amazing.
Awesome. And all right. So we've gone through the third one for everyone, and we're going to come back and touch on Skeen and some others, I think, as we go through the year. So we'll save some of that ammunition. So Justin, I'm going to start with you for the number 2 top moment for Andor so far. What's your second one?
Yeah. So my number 2 moment, and I really struggled over this one. I knew I wanted my first one and my third one, but I think it's in episode 5, Slim or Cassian's speech when they are on their way to the mission. After Skeen steals the necklace from him and confronts him, and he tells him, "Yeah, I am a mercenary." I think it really set the tone, and it showed us a lot about who Cassian is, and that he's not a dreamer, he's not idealistic, and it's not about the Empire for him either. Like, he tells him, "I'm here for the money." And when they get so mad at them too, I think he says, if it wasn't this, it would have been something else, right? They're making excuses, and he tells them that they're showing fear. Or that they're losing nerve, I guess, is what he tells him. Asked him if he's afraid. He said, "Of course I'm afraid." He said, "But there's a difference between fear and losing nerve." But I just thought that whole speech was really, there's a lot of really rich commentary in there, and it was really powerful.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it was one of those moments where he just calls him out on it. And I mean, I think some of it's a little bit self-serving, and we're going to come back to this too, because this is on my list as well. Here a little bit later, but I think this was a really key moment for Andor, and I'm really curious how far this speech takes him, and how many times we go back and reference this throughout the next, season and a half that we've still got to go.
Because we do know, having seen Rogue One, like there's growth and change from that speech to who he becomes, right? So seeing Absolutely. That, the path that lays for him is really fascinating.
All right, Rob, what's your second one?
My number 2 is going to be the heist, the robbery itself. It just gives me that whole Force 10 from Navarro, Kelly's Heroes, the Dirty Dozen, just a great World War II feel. It was well put together. The action was perfectly timed, and you still feel for the characters as they drop one by one as they're getting ready to get on the ship. Loved it.
You talk about, we talked about this before, the tension that is just constantly building up, all the things that have to go right, the things that are going right, with Gorn and the tension with Skeen. I mean, and it's just really cool that all of these pieces and everybody plays their role perfectly, and the unknown too of what's going on with Cinta in the background, and even the tension with Vel. Like, we just don't understand some of the dynamics, and we know as it goes on further and further, something is going to go wrong, even though it hasn't really gone completely off the rails. There's still a chance to do all of this. But I'm with you. I think the heist in general, from an extended sequence, is probably one of the best so far in it, and that's not even including the whole visual spectacle that we get, a little bit later on. Yeah, Rod, what's your second one?
So my second one comes from episode 3. It's the transfer of trust that's happening between Luthen and Andor when they're in that room with the metal ship parts from the ceiling. How it's kind of like a standoff, and should I trust you? Should I not trust you? Are you trying to play me? It's a very delicate line that Luthen has to walk to get, to build that trust and build that rapport, especially with the intensity of like troops moving in, and then when it all just goes belly up, those the ship parts flying back and forth and hitting, that was really cool to watch. I don't know if I've seen anything like that before in anything like any other type of film.
So what did you think about how much Luthen knew about Andor and his family and his father in particular? What types of feelings were kind of stirring up for you during those moments, or what's going through your mind as you're hearing these things, as you start to think through what Andor must be experiencing?
On Luthen's side, it makes total sense. You want to know the person you're talking to. You want to know as much as you can. So it makes your time, like walking that tightrope a little bit easier. On the Cassian side, it was probably very scary and nerve wracking because he's gotten off, and we see in other episodes, manipulating the truth and his truth, saying he did things that he didn't. He was places he wasn't. And that was kind of like his comfort zone as he navigates, the universe on his own. And then you have Luthen who just knows all the truth.
Yeah, exactly.
So it probably threw him off guard and made him maybe vulnerable in a sense to say like, oh, no one's taken this approach. Maybe I should trust them. It looks like, maybe.
Well, and Luthen makes such a great argument too, that, your options are limited here. The Empire's, or the Corsac, I guess, basically is, they're on their way. And you can keep running. I like that we get almost a callback to the scene later on whenever the Empire is after Andor, when everything starts going down in, what was it, the episode 7, I believe. So I like that, things have shifted to where Andor's like, well, I used to be able to get around these streets whenever I wanted, this episode that you're talking about. And then now he's completely unable to move at all, no matter where he goes. So I kind of like that dynamic there.
The world is changing.
Exactly. Yeah. And due to some of it due to his own doing at this point, later on, of course. So I had a really hard time with my second one. And because I kept going back and forth between number 2 and number 1 and changing these out, between them. And so I settled on Luthen in episode 4, the Aldani episode. And it's really kind of numerous scenes. So maybe I cheated a little bit here, but it's my show. I'll do what I want. And so I love the scenes with Mon Mothma and just the dynamic they have. Like when they're together on screen, it's just so dynamic. I mean, it's just so much. I mean, there's so many words being said that aren't being said. And you could argue that the later scene that we got, after episode 6 was maybe overall stronger and more emotional. But this was our really first touch point between these two characters. And we were really concerned, or we were curious how the political atmosphere was going to turn out with the show. And this was the first kind of guarantee that no, they've really taken care and they're going to make this work. And you got to see 2 amazing actors at play here. And you got to see the way that Luthen you start to get a better idea for what he believes and what he's willing to sacrifice, and the questions about where he aligns, knowing that we've got Saw Gerrera coming at some point, and how that ties in with Mon Mothma and that tension there too. I just thought it was really cool dynamic between them, and really anytime they've been on screen has been just absolutely magic in my opinion. But in addition to that, though, was his transformation on the Fondor ship, and I mean, just the way that he kind of went about, getting ready and his, smiling and pretending to wave and just practicing, basically getting himself into character. I just thought it was so unique to Star Wars. Like, we don't see things like that very often, and so to have a moment like that, I thought was really cool. And I have a feeling some of this is probably on some lists here shortly, so I won't pry too much. But if anybody has anything they'd like to add on to that, I would love to hear as well.
Well, I'm glad you referenced the politics, because I know you and Albert have been a little, worried about that those aren't going to come off well or be interesting. But I think they've done really well, and which is encouraging because Star Wars hasn't always done great with the politics. I think we all know, but I think those have been handled really well, and it helps, like you said, to have Stellan Skarsgård and Genevieve O'Reilly being the ones handling those scenes.
Absolutely, yeah. I think they've come across really well, and they've been less. I mean, the only time it was a concern, I think, was actually later on when the awkwardness of Mon Mothma addressing the Senate when no one's listening. At that point, I was like, man, politics suck.
But it's supposed to be awkward, right? Because the Senate is a formality.
It was the intent. Exactly. Okay. So we've got to the top two. Let's do a little bit of honorable mentions now. So, Rob, going to start with you with some honorable mentions. What are some things that did not make your list? Some scenes that didn't make your list, characters. What were they, and why? Why were they important, but why did they not make your list?
Well, I think the one that's grabbing at me right now is the communication tower, where she goes and meets up, and she needs to reach out to Luthen, and so she sneaks off in this back area behind these tubes and climbs up this pipe, and this is how she's doing the communication. And I thought it was a great way to show just everywhere there's little groups of rebels or whatever trying to make adjustments to how the Empire is now running the planet. So how it was laid out was great. I don't see it going as a top 1, 2, or 3, but I really thought it was worth bringing up.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. Is there another scene you got?
Well, Skeen was on the other one, and I think we've discussed that pretty much where he was killed. I thought it was great that here's this guy who's constantly trying to point out Andor is doing something wrong. He's the bad guy. He's the one we need to watch. He's the one that's going to take. We're all along. He's just upset because here's someone who's going to probably beat him to the punch.
Right.
And so to see that finally open up and how Andor handled it quickly, just like he did in Rogue One, was really nice. Nice tie back.
So one thing I'll maybe chime in about the way that they communicate, the way that Bix goes up and communicates with Luthen. Yep. I think it's those details kind of across the show have been really cool. They're these background type of things that enhance everything that's going around you. So things make sense, but they don't have to get into a ton of detail as to why it's all set up and have to give you all the history. Right. It just kind of works, and it just kind of is there, and it's already established, and you just accept it and you can move on. You don't have to necessarily get bogged down in all the details. You can focus on the things that really matter. And I think that's one of the things the series in general has done exceptionally well. And I think that's one really good, very subtle example that maybe many may not think about it in those terms, because it's a pretty key element for how they're going to communicate, especially when we get past episode 6.
Well, and you see that a little bit even in Rebels. I mean, that's similar to Ezra's little tower that he's up and he's doing the communication later on. Yeah, I feel there was a bit of a tie-in to that if you put the two together.
Yeah, good point. Rod, honorable mentions for you.
Yes. When I was rewatching it, something stood out. It was in episode 6 when the Aldhani townsfolk are communicating with the Empire. And in the quote is, "May the eye stay open long enough to find the good in you." And the leader of the tribe, the chieftain or whatnot, made that comment. And then it pans over to, I guess, the commander, the Empire representative. Mm-hmm. I forget his name. And he looks blank, and it goes back to two townsfolk, like two women looking at each other. And to me, that look was like, ooh, burn.
Right.
Got him.
What I like the other scene though with the chief as well, when Gorn intentionally mistranslates what he does, and the guy just looks at him. He's like, "That was not what I said."
Those townfolk are over it. They are over everything that's going on with the Empire while they're there, keeping up with appearances. They are just so done with it.
So on that point with Aldhani, do you think we go back to Aldhani at any point, or do you think we're done with Aldhani?
Maybe there might be some scenes where they're doing some like research or recon, or they find something, or there's a clue, or like, let me go check the evidence myself. I don't know, maybe something like that. But I think, we've seen that arc of that story, and I guess the fans probably want to see other environments.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe Miro goes out there as part of the investigation, but beyond that, unless someone survived, yeah, I don't really see much of a need to go out there either.
Right.
All right, Justin, how about your honorable mentions?
Yeah, so I've got a few here, and this is where some of my scenes I'll start taking pretty good liberties with the term scene here, because I felt like it was so hard to pull out individual scenes because the show is everything's so connected and so well written together. So I wanted to say, first of all, the scene when they're on Aldani and the TIE fighter buzzes them in the valley there, and they have to throw everything away.
Mhm.
I just thought just the visuals and the FX in that scene were really cool, where you get that long shot of it making that turn up by the mountain and coming back through them, and then it goes up over the dam where Gorn is walking. Just was a really cool scene to see that. Any scene, I wrote down any scene with Luthen and Stellan Skarsgård. I think he just like steals the show in a lot of ways. He's so good, and I like Stellan Skarsgård as an actor a lot anyway. So I think he brings a lot to the show. And then the other one, this almost made my top 3, and then I pushed it out, was the intro we get in episode 1, and this really stretches, I think, across most of the episode, but it's the intro to this world on both Morlana 1 and on Ferrix, and just how it's so unique as a Star Wars setting from anything we've got before. And I mean that in the sense of, if you go back and watch, especially those first 3 episodes, there are no stormtroopers. There are really no TIE fighters. There's not an Empire logo like very prominently placed. It gave me the sense that this is a big galaxy, and as big as the Empire is, there are like every place is different, and there are places where the Empire is just starting to touch, and they still have the corpos there and stuff. But I just thought that galaxy building that they did here was really cool and was really unique for Star Wars. And I love Star Wars, and I love the Star Wars imagery, but seeing something that was just completely different I thought was really cool and really well done by the show creators.
That is a good point. I mean, there's so many examples of it too, both cinematography wise, as well as just the way that they capture the environments has just been absolutely amazing. And really, one of my honorable mentions kind of rolls in with some of this, is that the way that it ties with Rogue One is really so well done. You really do feel like you are directly associated with that movie, which is really difficult to sometimes recreate that magic, right? Or recreate that true connection, that true lineage, but between the content. And I think they've just done it so well here, but at the same time, still made it so unique to this show. Like the whole Blade Runner vibe at the very beginning, right? And just these scenes that we don't normally get in Star Wars. You get them in maybe like an animated short or something like with Visions, right? So with Visions, we had some very different, stylistic choices and different perspectives on it. But visually, this is the first time we've actually had these in a more of a live action type of setting. And while I'll say I've been a bit critical of the music, because I think the music is just kind of all over the place sometimes. It's good, but all over the place. But I like that the visuals it does, to me, it feels like Star Wars. It feels like Rogue One Star Wars, which I think is probably the best compliment.
Hey everyone, it's Jonesy. We hope you've enjoyed this preview of the Patreon episode. If you'd like to listen to the episode in full, we invite you to head over to cantinacast.com/Patreon. Access to this episode begins at the $2 After Dark tier. If you're interested in joining a future Patreon episode, we encourage you to check out our Now Part of the Tribe and Delusions of Grandeur tiers. You can find all the details at cantinacast.com/Patreon. On behalf of Albert and myself, thank you all for your continued support, and may the Force be with you.